Hi, I'm Jacquie B. I'm an airshow pilot. I fly an extra 300 with a light foaming 350 horsepower, and the roll rate is about 400 degrees a second. Very aggressive. I'm doing a lot of gyroscopic tumbling of the airplane, meaning I'm swapping in for in. It's hot in the cockpit, I'm sweating, I'm working really hard. Shows when I was 50 years old, and I have flown well over 300 airshow performances in 11 plus years, and I'm still going strong. That bizarre at 50 years old, but as it turned out, I just happened to be 50 when I was ready to do this. And I started flying, not young, I started flying formal lessons at 32 years old. And the reason I waited so long, well, several reasons. First of all, there was no money for college, so I went right to work. So there was very little money for anything other than working and making a living, let alone paying for flying. So my goal was to fly airplanes from, I think, the first time I flew an airplane was in a DC-3, and I was 3 years old. My father worked for McDonnell Douglas Aircraft, so the DC-3 is a very special airplane to me. I used to skydive out of them as well. But in the olden days, I'm pretty old right now, and all those years out of high school, all I did was dream about flying. I wanted to fly so badly. I worked and worked, I worked. One time I had 4 jobs, but most of the time I had 2 jobs. A couple of times I had 3 jobs depending on how much time I had, and every hour I worked was X number of dollars that I could put towards flying. I started flying when I was 32 years old because that's how long it took me to save enough money. But on the other side of that whole equation, part of the reason it took me so long was because I was born into a family where girls didn't go to college, they get married and have babies. There's no reason to educate girls. So I had that to overcome because I didn't feel that that was what I was destined to do. And I really wanted to fly airplanes. And I made the fatal mistake of not telling anyone when I was younger. So I had no mentors. I had no one pushing me along. Nobody knew that I wanted to do this other than myself and maybe a few friends. But by the time I did start flying airplanes, I was scared to death that I wasn't smart enough to fly an airplane. I had lived many years, I'd been in the cockpit, I'd been in the airplane, and I'd get a glimpse of the panel and think, there's no way I'll ever learn. I'm just not, I didn't get to go to college, there's just no way I'll be able to learn all that stuff. It just looked so overwhelming to me. So I was fearful that I wasn't smart enough, so the fear kept me from trying. I was so afraid of failing that I didn't have the courage to try. And I finally woke up one Tuesday morning, and I am so tired of hearing myself say, I wish I could fly an airplane. That Tuesday night, I was in ground school. I started that, of course I knew when ground school, I'd known when ground school started every year of all those years. I just simply had to show up, and I finally had the courage to walk in the door. I was the only girl, there were about 20 guys, all young guys, and I was way older than all of them. And I worked really, really, quit laughing. I was terrified, but I wanted it so badly. And being the only girl in there, I knew I had to do well. It was not about being a girl, but it was about getting a good grade, because I couldn't fly an airplane if I didn't learn the stuff. So as it turns out, I got the best grade, I got the highest score on the written test. I think I missed one question. I got a better score than all those guys because I was so afraid of failing. I worked so hard. I nearly memorized the entire books, and I was reading 4 or 5 different books. So I spent an awful lot of time studying because failing just wasn't in the cards. So at 32, I'm out flying a little Cessna 150. I'm doing about 90 miles an hour, maybe 100 miles an hour, it's not fast. And I'm bored to tears. Between takeoff and landing, there is nothing to do. I sit there, make a takeoff. If you're not on fire, there is nothing to do. So I'm flying along, I make my takeoff, and I go around, and I have enough money to buy about an hour of flight time. So I'm out tooling around, just looking around, and there's just nothing to do. I'm getting bored, hour after hour after hour of flying. And I'm a little bit disappointed because I thought it would be more exciting than this. And up until that point, I'd had really good landings, and that typically would make things very exciting for you if you weren't good at landing the airplane. But I did well. I learned well, I paid attention, and I knew that being a pilot wasn't about being a girl or a guy. It was about being a good pilot and learning the stuff. So one afternoon, I landed my little Cessna, and a friend of mine at the airport who owned a 2-place Pit Special, an aerobatic airplane, was pulling his airplane out as I was pushing mine in and asked me if I wanted to go for a ride. And at that time, I would have ridden with Godzilla. I would have gone flying with anybody. So of course I said yes. And of course I have no idea. I've been to air shows in my life with my father many, many times, but I never, it just wasn't one of those things that I really ever was reaching for. It was just, I loved airplanes. I never ever saw myself doing that. So when we jump in this airplane, I really don't know what I'm in for. We take off, we leave the airport environment. He says, "Are you ready?" And I'm thinking, of course I'm ready, I'm here. So he does a roll. And oh my God, I get goosebumps right now because I remember that first flight. And I said, "Oh, do it again." So we spent an hour, maybe a little more than an hour, doing nothing but loops and rolls and some hammerheads and some Cuban 8s and just some basic aerobatics. And I don't think I slept for a week. I was so excited. I never knew that there was anything to do with an airplane other than take off, fly around like this, and land the airplane. It never occurred to me that you could do that with an airplane. So here I am now, excited beyond belief that there is something to take that boredom away. And all I could think about was doing aerobatics. Well, okay, so I've worked very hard to get what I've gotten. And now I look into the world of aerobatics. Now, people ask what makes an airplane fly. I guarantee you it's money. Which I had none of. So now, to go into the aerobatic world, I am going to fly an airplane that's high performance and extremely expensive because the insurance is high, because there are very few of them for obvious reasons. It's just not something, it's not a mainstream airplane. So finding one at a flight school, first of all, is difficult. And if they have insurance, I went from $50 an hour flying my Cessna with gas to over $300 an hour with gas and an instructor. So all I could do was work. I just kept working. And however much flying I could do, it took me 10 years almost from that first aerobatic ride before I actually, at Attitude Aviation, took my first formal aerobatic lesson. And in that 10 years, from the day, that first day I was flying, that airplane, the Pit Special, it's a little biplane, was of course my most favorite airplane in the world because that was my introduction. And I went out and bought a POH, which is a Pilot's Operating Handbook. And it literally is from front to back. It tells you everything you need to know about the aircraft. Power settings, it's just all the information you need to know about that aircraft is in this POH. I bought one, and I had memorized it for 10 years. I read that book, because I knew someday down the road I was going to get to fly a Pit Special again, because that's my goal. So by the time I actually took my first lesson at Attitude Aviation here in Livermore, I already knew how to fly it. I really did, because I had read that book, and I had dreamed of flying that airplane for so long. I got as if I'd been doing it all those years. So I saved myself a little bit of money by reading. Let me say that again. I saved myself a whole lot of money because I was reading. I learned a lot of stuff from reading. I've always been a voracious reader, so when I don't have money, I go find a book and I read, because I can teach myself to do things by reading. So fast forward, I now can afford aerobatic lessons. And within a very short period of time, I soloed the pits, and now I'm on. If I had died the day after, I would have done everything on my bucket list, and I would have been the happiest girl in the whole world. I was so excited. So now what do I do with the aerobatics? Now that I can fly aerobatics, I'm working as a legal assistant and making pretty good money, so now I can actually afford to fly a couple of times a week at $300+ an hour. And I realized that once you learn basic aerobatics, that's pretty much the beginning, because now I want to learn some more. What's next? Got to learn something else. And I couldn't, you shouldn't be self-taught in an airplane. So I chose not to be self-taught, meaning I need to go find an instructor and say, okay, what do I do next? What do I do with this aerobatics? So I found an instructor, and he started coaching me and mentoring me and teaching me. I started competition, which is very much like ice skating. You fly 3 flights. Everybody flies the same set of figures, which is the known, like figure skaters, they all have to fly the same figures. Everybody does the same thing once. Then you get a freestyle, you build your own. It has to have certain components and X number of points, and everybody gets a chance to fly a free program, just like in ice skating. And then the third flight is an unknown. They give it to you the night before, everybody gets the same sequence, nobody gets to practice it in the air. All you can do is look at it and do the dance all night long and memorize that sequence so that when you go out there, you're flying it for the first time, only time for points. So that separates the boys from the girls. So whoever walks away from that competition with the most points gets the trophy. There's no money involved. All the money goes one way. It's all going out. So in that time frame that I'm doing competition, and there are 4 or 5 levels of competition. So you start at the basic and you work your way up and you learn more complex maneuvers as you get better. That's the whole idea. The best part about competition is that if you show up at a contest, chances are you want to win. Most people don't go to a competition thinking, oh, I got nothing better to do, I'll just go spend $200 and see how I do. Pretty much everybody in the back of their mind says, I've practiced, I've paid my dues, I'm going to go, I think I can win this. So the practice requires you to strive for perfection. You're not going to get the 10 unless the figure is perfect. And the only way to make the perfect figure is to burn gas. And you do it over and over and over. So it's expensive to prepare for a contest if you want to win. If you don't care if you win or not, you don't have to spend a lot of money. You just go out and fly whatever you got, and you might be at the bottom of the list, which is no fun either, especially when you get to the bar. So, everybody wants the trophy, and it makes you practice for perfection. It teaches you a very healthy respect for where the ground is, because that's what we don't want to hit. The idea is that doing all that crazy stuff, if you don't do it as near perfect as possible, chances are you're going to do something stupid and you may hit the ground. So, when we fly low, we don't get many do-overs. A lot of us do get a second chance at times. A lot of people have not. So I've added a tremendous degree of difficulty and risk to what is otherwise flying straight and level. Like I said, if you're not on fire, it's pretty simple and pretty basic, and anybody in this room can do it. Anybody in this room can get in a Cessna this afternoon and fly that airplane. I guarantee you. I would bet you $100 that everybody in here, in the first 10 minutes of the flight, will be flying the airplane. That's how simple it is. Not to make it sound not so tough, but it's the striving for learning the next thing. You read some more, and you learn something else, and you work your way to what I have basically What I have now is the PhD of aerobatics. I fly air shows. My waiver that the FAA gives me is they allow me to fly all the way to the ground, but just short of it. So I have no limitations to where I fly. When we start, I can't go lower than 800 feet. When I flew my first air show, I was limited to, I could not come lower than 800 feet. I have to fly, it took 2 years to get to the next level, which is 500 feet. Another year and a half to get to the next level, which is 250 feet. So by the time you have 5-6 years of experience flying air shows in this environment, you have earned the right to get the unlimited waiver, which means I can fly all the way down to the ground, but just short of it. So, with that unlimited waiver comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. I have proven to the people that gave me that certificate that 1, I'm safe, 2, I know the rules, and 3, I'm going to live by all of them. And that's the key word, is live. I'm not going to go out and do stupid things. I'm not going to be self-taught. I'm going to go to an instructor when I want to learn something new. If it's something that I'm not familiar with, I'm going to take, my airplane has 2 seats, so I'm going to take somebody up with me who I know knows how to do something that I want to learn. I'm not going to go try it on my own. But once I learn it with that instructor, now I have to go out on my own, go very high, and practice it. And when I screw it up, all I do is push the nose over, get the nose going down, get some airspeed, and start over. It's not the end of the world if I screw up the maneuver, if I do it high. Practice is done high. Air shows is done down low. Because you came out to see me fly what I'm flying. If I don't fly right in front of you, you won't be able to see what I'm doing. But practice is done up there. And the discipline is unlike anything you can imagine. When I'm practicing, I set an imaginary floor. Depending on where I go, depending on what I'm going to practice or what I'm going to do, I may set the floor at 3,000 feet. And at 3,000 feet, when my altimeter says it's straight up on 3,000 feet, if I see that anywhere in this routine that I'm doing, I'm done. Because I just hit the ground. So I have to do something different in what I just practiced. First of all, I'm starting higher. Because I obviously didn't plan enough altitude to do what I was planning to do. So I'm going to start a little higher. And every time I go from down here up to here, I'm calling out loud altitudes and airspeed. I'm going to say 190, 195 knots, pulling at 50 feet, and I'm going to get up to the top. I want to be at no less than 1,200 feet before I actually initiate the maneuver that I'm coming up to do next. I have a minimum altitude that I will not do anything at. And if I didn't have 195 knots down here, if I hear myself call out 180, I immediately have to do something different because I'm 15 knots slower. And when I go up, gravity is going to keep me from going as high as I want because I'm not as fast, correct? So when we come downhill, we want as much airspeed as possible because I want to get as far away from the ground before I do something. I want all that energy to take me up there when I start tumbling, because as I start tumbling the airplane, it gets slower and slower and slower, and we run out of energy, and now the nose comes down no matter what I'm doing, and I dive for the ground to get more airspeed, to do it again. So if I didn't get as high as I want up here, guess what? I don't have enough room to make that 195 knots. So I have to do something different. I have to, right now, decide to do something different. And my whole routine is designed so that when I don't have the numbers, I have another figure I'm going to do. So the idea is that in all these years that I've been flying air shows, there are so many variables that change. Every airport's different, the air is different, the air is hot, the air is cold. There's all these things that work on the airplane and the pilot to take you off your game, basically. I can do my routine in my sleep. I don't worry about knowing what figure comes next. And keep in mind, I'm flying in a box in front of you. So I have to keep turning around. If I go that way in one direction, I'm going to be in Tracy, and you can't see me. So I have to go this way a little ways, then I got to pull up and turn around so I can stay in front of you. So I'm doing this constantly. So my world is in this box. And as I'm doing things, my job was to entertain you. I don't want to do the same thing over and over again because you're going to go get a hot dog. So I'm going to do something different at each time. So in all the years of flying, I've had lots of different things go wrong, go badly, go differently, and you get good at doing this. What's next? What's next? What's the altitude? What's the airspeed? That won't work, do this. So, and that dance that you saw me doing prior to just crawling in the cockpit, I'm in my head, I'm flying the flight. I visually see it. It's like a golf swing. If you visualize the golf swing, you usually get a pretty good golf swing. So I'm visualizing the flight. I'm calling out the airspeeds and the altitudes, because all I'm going to do is glance. Because I'm busy doing stuff, I'm going to glance for the airspeed and the altitude, and it's got to be there, or I have to go to plan B. So there's a lot of fast thinking. So that's why the routine isn't memorized, because if it was memorized, I wouldn't be able to change midstream as quickly as I sometimes need to. Most of the time, everything goes like clockwork. And you land, and you go, yeah, that was awesome. Every now and then I pull way harder than I planned, but when the adrenaline is pumping, sometimes you just get really strong. You come out. Sometimes my neck hurts after I fly, but I do it all the time, so I'm very acclimated to it. But every now and then, when things are going really, really well, and everything is just going perfectly, and I push hard or I pull hard, and I look at the G meter afterwards, and I go, oh, no wonder my neck hurts. But the bottom line is that what I do is very unusual for a girl my age in this world. But in my world, it's not so unusual, and I have never ever had a problem being a girl in this business, simply because I knew from the beginning I had to be a good pilot. It was all about, can you fly or not? Don't think that being a girl is going to just all make it work for you. I learned that early on. The guys generally don't have much time to wait for anybody who's going to play that girl card, or whatever it is that girls do. It just doesn't work in this world. It's a man's world. It will always be. But you just have to be a good pilot, and I've never ever had, I still get to be a girl everywhere I go. But they know I'm willing to do what it takes to be a good pilot and not make them look bad. So after all these years, I've been flying air shows. I started when I was 50 years old, and I'm starting my 15th year this year. So I enjoy talking to adults as much as I do children, because often I speak to a lot of women afterwards, and it doesn't matter what age you are. There are women who have emailed me and said, you know what, I went out and took that first flight. I spoke to a lady one time who was 49. She just turned 49. And I was after an air show, and I was signing autographs, and we were talking at the fence line, and she was so excited. She says, I finally made the decision to go skydive on my 50th birthday. She says, I'm so excited. She's taken her 2 years to talk herself into the skydive when she's 50. I said, how old are you now? She said, well, I just turned 49. I said, you're going to wait for another year? I said, that just wasn't making sense to me. I said, but you're so excited about it. You made this decision to go skydive. She said, well, but my decision was to do it when I'm 50. I said, well, what if you don't get to 50? I said, is tomorrow promised to any of us? And she stopped, and I said, you've made the decision to do this skydive. Why are you going to spend a year waiting for it? I said, what if, what if, what if, what if? I said, think about that. You've already made the decision to go. 50 is just a day. Tomorrow is as nice a day as maybe that 50th day might be. She sent me an email about 2 weeks later, and she said, I made that skydive. She says, I'm so glad I spoke. She says, because I can do something else now. She knocked that off her bucket list. So she now could go on, and she didn't want to make another one. She did one, and that was what she wanted, and she was really excited about that. And so she said, now I can go do something else. And it was all the idea that, get it out of your head that there are certain days that you're going to do certain things. The only time you have is right now. And if you want to do something, I don't expect you all to be aerobatic pilots. But if any one of you in here wants to learn to be a pilot, go take the flight. I guarantee you, you'll be flying the airplane once you're off the ground. If you want to take ballet lessons, go take ballet lessons. What does it matter how old you are? Some things may require money, so there is that. And it's all going to require your time. But if it's something you want to do, you always make money for it and you always make time for it. People think that people that own airplanes are rich. The difference between the rich ones and me is that I choose to spend all my money on my airplane. And my husband is okay with that too. We're not rich, but we spend all our money on one thing. We have a few other things, but you don't have to be rich to do what you want to do. So that's my story. Thank you. I'm going to introduce our last speaker is Barbara. She is a pilot as well, and she's in the 99s. And I have yet to meet a female pilot that was not a 99. I am also a 99, and most women pilots have joined the 99s at some point. So it's a great organization, and Barbara's going to tell us all about that. Thank you.
Hi, as Jackie said, I'm Barbara, and I'm one of those boring pilots. I'm the one that takes off, goes straight and level, maybe go out for lunch somewhere, and come back and land, and then walk away. But I'm one that, to echo both Candace and Jackie, I wanted to fly since I was a child. But when I got to high school, my eyesight went to the point that I had to start wearing glasses. And back in those days, to be an airline pilot or something like that, you had to have perfect vision. So I didn't have that. So I gave up the idea that I never could fly. And then about 10 years later, when I finished graduate school and I was living in Oklahoma, I met a young man who was my age, whose eyesight was worse than mine, and he was a pilot. And I said, how can you fly? And he goes, you can fly for yourself, you just can't fly commercially. So I thought, wow. So I started flying, palling around with him, and the bug came back. So, but at that time I was working in industry and I couldn't afford it. So that's when, actually I took ground school the first time, and so I knew what was going on when I flew with him. And then I decided I'm going to do this one day. So about 8 years later, I realized I had enough money saved, and I also had the time in my career that I could start learning how to fly. So that was 29 years ago when I got my pilot's license. And so I've been flying ever since, and as I said, I'm one of the boring ones. Another thing I did is I never have owned a plane. I've always rented planes. So that's something too. If you're a pilot, you don't have to own your own plane. There's flying clubs or fixed-base operators or flight schools that will actually rent planes to pilots. And that's what I do. And right now I have 2 friends that I fly with. We all rent together. And usually it will be one or the other, and we will fly out to lunch. One flies one way, one flies home, and we rotate this from time to time. And that's how I spend my time, and I find it very enjoyable. So one of the things I want to talk to you about is the 99s. And the 99s, Inc. is a women's international organization of pilots. And we are, as Jackie said, most women I know too have all been 99s at one time or another. And this is a fraternity of women, or sorority of women, that support each other and support the aviation. And that's what I want to explain to you today a little bit. So, 1929 was an important year for women in aviation. It was the year of the first Women's Air Derby, which was a race that went from California to Cleveland, Ohio. And it was an all-women competition where the women flew and competed. Oops. Here we go. Okay, so these are the women that eventually formed the 99. So from the air race, there was a thought that there was a bunch of people in the United States, mostly men unfortunately, who didn't think women should be flying airplanes. And they needed to form a group where they could have a camaraderie together and also to be able to promote this feeling of we can achieve aviation, we can advance in research, we can advance as pilots, we can race if we want, we can do everything. So in November of 1929, the call went out to 117 licensed women pilots, that's all there were in the United States at that point, to see if they would join an organization. So 26 of them met at Valley Springs, New York, at the Curtis Airport, and they decided to form a group so that they could support each other. And at first, the reason it was such a small group was there was very bad weather back on the East Coast, so most of these women had to drive in or take the train or whatever to get there. But as the couple of years went on, they expanded, and they ended up coming to the point of, what are we going to call ourselves? So there were some strange names that came up with, like the climbing vines, or the noisy bird women, or the homing pigeons. And then Amelia Earhart, who was one of the members, who was also famous, she and another woman decided, let's just organize this on how many women are going to be charter members. So they agreed on that. So first they were known as the 86s. And then they became the 97s. And finally they came down with the fact, we'll be 99. And they capped that title at that name. And they were the first charter members, were 99 women pilots. In 1931, they named Amelia Earhart as its first president. Today, the 99s has over 4,800 members. We cover over 44 countries in the world. We are divided into 25 sections and have over 155 chapters on 6 out of the 7 continents. Of the 99s today, we have commercial airline pilots. We have people that fly for industry and for the government, including military pilots. We have people that fly for pleasure. And we have people that fly as technicians or flight instructors or mechanics and other jobs related to aviation. We also have a mission statement that we are the International Organization of Women Pilots that promote general advancement in aviation through education, scholarships, mutual support, while honoring our unique history and sharing our passion for flight. One of the things we all believe in is we love to fly, and flying is fun. So in making it able to meet these goals, there's a number of things the organization either participates in or promotes. The first thing, 2 things, are the museums. The 99 actually runs the 99 Museums of Women the 99th Museum of Women Pilots. It's located in Oklahoma City, and it houses memorabilia of its members and also famous aviators. The organization also runs right now the Amelia Earhart Birthplace Museum, and that's located in Atchison, Kansas, and it is overlooking the Missouri River, and that is where Amelia Earhart had lived with her grandparents for most of her young life. The biggest thing we're involved in are scholarships. We have the Amelia Earhart Memorial Scholarship that provides licensed pilots with the ability to get some money to advance their careers and their training, and also help them continue with ratings or certificates or whatever they need. And there's several other scholarships that go under that. The organization has an endowment fund that also helps with research grants as well as scholarships. And they also now have a program for student pilots to participate in that's called Fly Now. And this gives student pilots the opportunity to get money. It's up to $6,000 towards completion of a recreation pilot or a private pilot or a sport pilot certificate. And then the sections, as well as the various chapters, they also, from time to time, will sponsor scholarships for people to be able to help advance their ratings or certificates in aviation. Outside of scholarships, the organization and the members of the organization do a lot of work with promoting education and space and aviation and space for everybody from young children in grammar school all the way up through adults. There's programs that members will go out into the schools and work with the schools to promote aviation, as well as we will a lot of times provide what we call pinch hitter or flying companion seminars that will get non-aviation spouses or companions with pilots to be able to learn what it's like to be in the aircraft and be able to feel comfortable in the aircraft they're flying with. Another thing we do is air marking. Air marking is actually painting the signs of the name of the airport on the runways or the taxiways, as well as doing a compass rose at the end of an airport runway to be able for pilots to gauge their compasses to the actual markings and make sure that they're still conforming to the proper, and they're calibrated to the proper settings. We have a lot of times we have fun flying. It could be fly-outs where a group of pilots get together and you fly out for a day, say for a lunch or a weekend outing. We also will do a lot of fundraising where we might have what's known as a poker run. And that's where you fly to different airports and you pick up an envelope with a playing card in it. And when you get back from flying to all the different airports, you put your hand together. And if you have a winning poker hand, you can earn some money. As a fundraiser, though, we're actually putting money in to be able to participate. So that's where you get that. A lot of times at different air events, they'll do spot landing competitions where people are trying to land like right on the numbers that are on the runway. And so there's prizes for that. Or you'll have flower bombing, which you'll have a sack full of flour, and then you try and hit a target that's on or off the airport. So those are like fun things. There's also, pilots will fly out for section meetings throughout the country or where they're located, and also the international meetings. Every year there's an international meetings, and it rotates around the world. And lastly then, there's skill building seminars, where a chapter will host a flight instructor or a person who's knowledgeable in aviation to come to speak to pilots about their skills, and then also sometimes the pilots will have the opportunity to go up with an instructor and then just hone down their skills. Because it's something, flying is something you're always learning. You're always keeping yourself practiced to be sharp. Because as Jackie said, if you get sloppy or you don't pay attention, you will hit the ground and it won't be pretty. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody, and I've put up some brochures in the back. The 99s also has a group that's called Friends of the 99s, and if you're interested in all finding out more information about us, we have some flyers back on the back table. Thank you. Thank you.